Hey guys, just to change some gears a little bit, but really, I don't know if it's changing gears. So, Frank and I, on our show, Truth Fanatics, those of you that haven't checked it out, check it out. Truth Fanatics. We often talk about how basically the world as we know it, essentially, the ruach, the energy, the spirit of the world, which you can see in kind of manifest in movies and in music, pop culture, it pretty much went south right around 1994, 95, 96. Safely 1994. And, we related to, oftentimes we related to, actually the death of the Lubavitcher Rebbe was right around that time. And also that very summer, the OJ trial started. And we always talk about how the OJ trial was the thing that precipitated this whole, kind of reality TV reality. Not only on TV, but in just in all of culture. It just precipitated this whole everything lost its wonder. Everything lost its or started to lose its wonder and its. I guess you want to use the word novelty, but it's not just novelty. Right? It's wonder. It's magic. It's all the stuff that it had. In the 80s and 70s and 60s and even going back further. So it's interesting, guys. I was watching the Netflix documentary called Being Eddie. It's basically about Eddie Murphy, right? So they're just interviewing him, and then he's kind of going through the chronology of his, his career, his childhood, and then his career. He was saying how his dream as a kid even was to be famous, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And there was just no plan B. He always says this. I've watched many interviews. He's like one of my favorite, comics, obviously. Comics, actors, what have you. But he always says, I never had a plan B because, if all you have is plan A, then that's all you're focused on. And if that's all you're focused on, then, you're just going to manifest that, right? Listen, most people can't do this. But he knew, and he went for it, and that's what he got, right? So, it's interesting, guys. As he's going through his chronology of his movies, all the stuff that he ever did, I pulled up just, a list of his, because I remember most of his movies, right? I pulled up a list of his movies from start to finish. So basically, the first movie, he did SNL in the early 80s, 81, 82. The first movie he ever did was 48 Hours. He was 21 years old, right? In 1981 or 82, okay? 82, sorry. So, you basically go 48 Hours. I may skip a few movies. You're talking about Beverly Hills Cop. I guess 1 and 2. Golden Child, Coming to America, another 48 Hours. What is it called? A Boomerang. Distinguished Gentleman. So basically, I noticed right when he hit, I think it was the Distinguished Gentleman, that was 1992. The movie after that he did was Nutty Professor. That was a big hit. I'm not a big fan of that movie, but it was a big hit, right? Folks, after that was basically downhill. Yeah, he did, I think it was a movie called Life with him and Martin Lawrence. That was pretty good, but you could see, and then Bowfinger, he had a funny part where he was two different guys, a nerd and whatever, a famous actor. That was 1999. So basically, folks, after 92, his the roles that he did where he was playing just this kind of really, a character that he could do like these improv funny things in the role that were kept in the movie. That stopped in 1992. After 92, that stopped. That's it. That was it. Well, maybe Nutty Professor. After that, 94, that's it. It was over. Everything after that was just basically like either highly, just scripted and it wasn't really the Eddie Murphy we knew, or just stuff that was just like really bad, like kiddie movies, all those like the Shrek and the Norbit, Schmorbit, all that stuff, right? Dr. Dolittle, all those like movies for kids, my friends. But honestly, if you look at that, I think he was just a product of the spirit, or the loss of the spirit that I'm talking about. That's essentially what happened. He was probably the biggest and funniest and most versatile star in the 80s. Like really, there was a lot of them, but he was the most versatile. He can tap into any kind of character. He played like multiple characters at the same time. He played like old Jewish guy. He could play like he could do whatever you want, right? Coming to America, he played like a bunch of different roles, right? All those guys in the barbershop and stuff. Like, it's funny, it wasn't even necessary to have like those scenes, some of those scenes, right? But they were very, very funny. He got into like, he wore masks for that, prosthetics. Folks, that takes a long time. That's a pain in the butt, right? He was dedicated, right? So yeah, guys, after 92, when he did he did Boomerang in 1990. The irony is that the funniest character in that movie, there were two, Martin Lawrence and then Witherspoon. That was the guy that played his friend's father. Very funny. Eddie Murphy wasn't even the funniest in that movie. And then we had a Distinguished Gentleman, where he plays like the congressman, and he's actually quite funny in that movie. Okay? And he has some funny co-stars, whatever. My friends, it just goes to show, you have the brightest light in pop culture, and his career is quite literally it has like markers, it has signposts which delineate the entirety of that era, and the entirety of what actually happened, to a T, what I described in the beginning of this video. And it's interesting, guys, in this documentary, Eddie Murphy, he talks about how he got like very spiritual, right? After Nutty Professor, after 1994, he got very spiritual, and he, as a result of that, because he was living in Long Island, in a house in Long Island that he bought all throughout the 80s, and then he decided to make LA his permanent home. Why? Because he joked around. He's like, you come up to somebody on the streets in New York, he's like, talking about spiritual this. He's like, get the blank out of my face with that stuff, So he's like, LA, he's like, that's people are all about it. Oh, the spiritual this and spiritual that, and and the spirituality of the thing, and blah blah blah, all that stuff. So basically, it's almost as if Eddie, he felt what was happening. He felt what was coming, Almost in a way, maybe that's why he started all those movies. Besides the fact that he started, that he had kids and he couldn't do all these crass movies anymore. But in a way, he saw what was going on. He saw what was coming, and he realized, it's pretty much over. And okay, so he's gonna do a movie here, a movie there, kids movie, a silly movie, whatever it is. Yeah, he did some, I guess, dramatic roles, you want to call them, later on. But folks, the stuff that he's known for is stuff that is very, for lack of a better term, raw. He had a thing called a special called Raw, but I'm talking about like just this style, very off the cuff, very improv, very raw, very quick on his feet, and just very funny, like just natural and funny and relatable, even to people who didn't grow up like him. This is an African American guy who grew up in a certain, I guess, environment, but it was relatable. Yeah, guys. So that was the Eddie Murphy everybody understood and knew, and just wanted to see. Even now, guys, like in this documentary, he's talking about how there was like 2 flashes of brilliance. He's talking about how he's constantly recording ideas on his phone, like lines or concepts, and he's like, I never ruled out doing stand-up again. He's like, I haven't done stand-up since whatever, 1988, 1989. And at the end, he created this idea to have ventriloquist dummies. One of them is Bill Cosby, because he does Bill Cosby voice, and the other one is Richard Pryor. He does his voice. And then he had another one, Paul Mooney one, and a few others. And he's like, I want to do a thing where I'm sitting, and in between, the 2 ventriloquist dummies, the Cosby, you guys have checked out, it's hilarious, and the other side is Pryor, and they just talk, but they just talk about like stuff that Cosby's like, I didn't put the pill in people's chocolate, and Pryor's like, yeah, you put that pill, you son of. He's like, well, guess what? I didn't need no chocolate. I just took the pill. Like it's Richard Pryor, because he did drugs. So anyway, I don't know, it's just like stuff like that, like hilarious, and just like brings you back to like the magic. So yeah, guys, just goes to show. This whole thing Frank and I are talking about back, in all these different episodes that we had, just goes to show, there's a certain period of time that Hashem designates for Mashiach to come. And if Mashiach doesn't come at that time, then in this case we lost probably the biggest leader in modern Jewish history, Lubavitcher Rebbe. And since then, we had big rabbis, but there was no rabbi out there since Lubavitcher Rebbe that was recognized by the entire Jewish world, including completely secular and completely disconnected Jews. You could say maybe Ovadia Yosef, maybe Rabbi Kanievsky, but these are people, Ovadia Yosef connected with, let's say, Sephardic secular people just in Israel, or maybe in America a little bit as well. But guys, I'm telling you, again, I'm not saying he was Mashiach. I'm holding off on that one, but I gotta tell you guys, we lost the biggest person in Judaism, in the Jewish world, back in 1994, and since then, the light has diminished and diminished and diminished and diminished. And here we are, guys, in the year almost 2026, 5786. A couple of rabbis here and there are talking about, the arrival of Mashiach maybe soon, but, prior to that, putting that aside, we see what's going on in the world. We have all the signs that Mashiach is almost here, but we talk about it all the time, and I'm not the only one that talks about it, obviously, but you guys could see, you could look around, you could look at pop culture, music, movies. There's nothing new. There's nothing new and good. There's nothing new and good with absolute magic that was, if you were around back then to see it, and I'm not the only one that says this, guys. If you go, you guys listen to like 80s tracks on YouTube, you'll see in the comments section kids posting, hi, I'm 15, 16 years old, and You know, I feel like I have nostalgia for something I never lived. You know, I have a nostalgia for a time I didn't live in. Or I have nostalgia for music I never heard before, right? Or I wasn't alive to hear when it came out. Folks, these are comments one after the other, like this. So, even teenagers today understand when they hear magic, and they can discern, some of them, not all of them, but some of them can discern what has that spirit and what doesn't. So, Zat Hashem, guys, it's been, you know what, almost 32 years. And Zat Hashem, maybe, you know, 33 is an interesting number in Judaism. Maybe in the 33rd year, we'll get what Hashem ultimately has in store. The Geulah. All right, guys. Shabbat shalom.